Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in Bountiful, Bakersfield, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael, and today we welcome back to the show Maevius Lynn, who is a ceremonial magician and occultist with a particular focus in Thelema. So we wanted her to come up today and talk about misperceptions and truth about Thelema. But before we get started, Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our show. We've got some great stuff coming up next month. We start with Spell It Out, of course, at the beginning of the month, Krista's segment. And then we have Earl Grey Anderson with Men in Black again. We've rescheduled several times, so hopefully this time's the charm. And then Georgina Surratt Armstrong-Smith, who is the Priestess of Avalon, will be talking about hedge witches. And then we've got a special guest at the end of the month, author Gary Lockman, who some of you may better know as Gary Valentine, who was the bass player for Blondie, but he's an incredible occult philosopher and has written several books, and he'll be talking about the influence of occult in modern politics. So should be some great shows. And then we have a virtual meet and greet, the first one with me and Krista this Saturday from 10 in the morning until noon Pacific. And if you want, just get a hold of us and we'll send you a Zoom invite for that. Come hang with us and chit chat about anything you like. So all kinds of great stuff. So get all the information on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SIXTH, all spelled out. While you're there, if you can afford to, buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi. Helps us cover a little bit of our cost. But the main thing is go to YouTube, click like and subscribe, and help us grow our channel. And that's the thing that we appreciate the most. So with that being said, I don't want to take up any more time. So I'm going to kick it back to you guys. So take it away, Krista and Lynn.
Great. Thank you, Michael, and welcome to the show, Lynn.
Thank you so much. What a joy and pleasure it is to be joining you all once again. I am so excited for the conversation today.
Me too, and we've always enjoyed having you on our magic panels and then separately too, and I think Michael discovered you. Anyway, so it's a topic I think that you had suggested, but I've thought about a lot of times on my own, even though I'm not part of Thelema. But I obviously do respect and like Aleister Crowley a lot. I use his deck in my readings. So why don't you tell us a little bit first for people that might not know what Thelema is?
Sure. Thelema is a system of mysticism, a philosophy, and a religion that was sort of kicked off by Aleister Crowley. It continues today and is expressed through individual practitioners as well as organizations. Some of the big organizations around are Ordo Templi Orientis, which is a paramasonic order similar to the Freemasons, but around the law of Thelema, as well as the AA, which is a teaching order.
So, and then, I think that it's hard to, if you want to know Thelema a little bit about, which I did, it seems difficult to just jump right into Aleister Crowley's books. And he's a challenging writer in some ways because of when he wrote, and also he was highly educated. So what would you recommend if I just wanted to get a little more of a sense? I know you have videos on it, and do you have any other recommendations?
Yeah, well, thank you for mentioning my YouTube channel. That's a really cool project that I have ongoing. It's basically my service, or one of my service projects to the community, where I do demonstrations, I bring up topics, I do Q&As, all of that. So if someone is a solo practitioner, for example, and wants to dip their toes in, I cover a lot of stuff. Really practical stuff. I also give a lot of in-person workshops and classes. So if people are interested in getting hands-on in person with me, find me on social media. I'm always advertising. This year I'll be at Mystic South. I'll be at Thelemacon, although I won't be presenting at Thelemacon, but I will be there. And so I do a lot of that as well. But for people who are also interested in books and sort of doing that path, I do recommend perhaps picking up a more modern author first to sort of dip your toes in, especially if you're brand new. And some of those authors I'm going to recommend, first of all, are Lon Milo Duquette. Mm-hmm. He is a fantastic practitioner, occultist, who's an amazing writer as well, has fantastic humor. And that's one of the reasons I recommend people a lot of his books like Chicken Kabbalah, because they're just so fun to read. Then I'm going to recommend David Shoemaker. He has written a book called Living Thelema. And recently, hot off the press, The Way of the Will. This is a follow-up to Living Thelema. This is a little bit more advanced, but it is still a fantastic read and I think appropriate, especially if you read it in conjunction with Living Thelema. And for the third recommendation I'm going to give for people who are particularly interested in knowing about Aleister Crowley, I'm going to recommend the biography Perdurabo by Richard Kaczynski. It's a thick read, but it's a fantastic one, and it approaches him as a historical figure without selling an agenda. So it's well researched by an academic, so you get to make up your own mind about Thelema and Crowley. And I will say Perdurabo is a bit dense and thick, which for people who don't have time to read, there is an audiobook coming out on the horizon. It should be possibly out at the end of the year. We'll see. But for people who don't want to wait and want something maybe a little thinner, I'm going to recommend The Wiser Concise Guide to Aleister Crowley. That is a fantastic read. It's short, it's sweet. It's on my shelf somewhere behind me for our viewers and listeners. But yeah, The Wiser Concise Guide to Aleister Crowley is fantastic and a great place to start as well.
And bringing up Aleister Crowley, obviously, this is why there are misperceptions about Thelema a lot of times. So I would say there's some, because of some of the people I've met personally that say they're followers of Aleister Crowley. So let's talk a little bit about some of the ones you find are particularly egregious that are misperceptions about Thelema.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess for some additional context for our viewers and listeners, so I'm very involved in my in-person community, although I do write, and some of my writings are magazines and stuff like that. My main core volunteer work is in-person community. So I'm doing a lot of outreach, I'm doing a lot of event organizing, and one of the walls I run up against over and over again is the blatant discrimination. And I will say it, I know that's a loaded word for people, but it is a form of bigotry and discrimination against Thelemites. Thelemites are practitioners of Thelema in pagan and witchcraft spaces. So I will approach an occult bookshop, for example, and be like, hey, I noticed you're allowing people to teach tarot workshops. I would love to pay to reserve a space to teach about the Thoth deck. The Thoth deck, for people who may not be familiar, it's a little bit different system than the Rider-Waite-Smith that Frida Lady Harris and Aleister Crowley came up with. It was really Frida Lady Harris's deck with the guidance of Crowley. But I want to spread what I think is a very powerful and helpful form of divination, magic. So I was like, yeah, I want to teach classes, and nope, we don't. The door's closed in my face because I'm a Thelemite. And this has happened again and again. I have so many instances of this. And this really comes down to a lot of different things, but one of the big ones is this belief that Thelemites are black magicians, and that we are dark and we are evil, and what we are doing is black magic, versus someone who may be a witch practicing white magic, and we're the dark evil ones. And this really couldn't be farther from the truth. I don't consider what I do black magic. I can't think of a Thelemite who does, although I'm sure in the comments will be like, oh, me, I do black magic. But I think that for the most part, the point of Thelema, what are y'all trying to achieve? Well, we're trying to achieve alignment with our true self and the divine, right? And this is something we refer to as true will. So we're trying to discover and do our true will. That's the general, what Thelemites are trying to do. And we do that a number of different ways. I mean, that can be done through ritual magic, through prayer. There's no set path to realizing your spiritual goals and yourself, but ultimately, our goal is one of unity with divinity and the divine. So I don't view that as black magic, and it's really disheartening to see old rumors, old biases, old ideas that really came about in tabloids during Crowley's life, and then were kind of dusted off during the Satanic Panic and reemerged to sort of stoke the flames of tabloids and propaganda for demonizing things that weren't traditional Christianity as someone viewed it. So, I mean, those things are sort of floating around the milieu that were evil and black magicians, and people just sort of latch onto that. And it's disappointing when the pagan witchcraft community in particular buys into, essentially, a lot of it is Christian propaganda, and people with a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn.
I am a little surprised about that. Maybe I could see maybe a specific pagan group, but to have it happen more than once, it shows a lack of education on their part, because that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I think there are people I respect that I do think they still think Aleister Crowley was a black magician, which I also find really a little odd. I think I got interested in him because he was so provocative, and also because I loved the deck. And so obviously if you love something, you want to know more about it. And so I know I read at least one biography, I forget which one. And then, of course, I've read some of his books, and I sort of fell in love with him in a weird way, because he's one of these people that gets better as you get to know him instead of worse. And most people get worse as you get to know them, that are at least famous people, their shadow side. And so, and of course, he was a very provocative figure. But one of the things that I found about reading his own work is his complete dedication to magic, like his, even to the end, when I read like excerpts from his diary, is just, it's very inspiring that someone would do that for their whole life, particularly at the end where he didn't really have a lot of attention for it or money.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I was always impressed that he managed to keep a magical journal every day, even to his last. Like when he was very, very old, like the journal entries were much shorter and more sparse, but he was still keeping a magical journal. Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point about his dedication to magic, and ultimately to liberating mankind from ignorance, superstition, these old aeonic, as I would call them, beliefs centering around guilt and shame, around our human condition and our natural expression of what I would consider divine. I mean, whether that's your sexuality, your gender, any of these factors that make you the beautiful individual you are. That was really the central part of Crowley. And at a time during the Victorian era, especially, where you just couldn't be outwardly homosexual. You couldn't be outwardly bi. You couldn't be outwardly genderqueer. And Crowley was this very himself figure, to the point where he was very unapologetic with his gender and sexuality, and he made a lot of enemies. And people love a good rumor, and the rumor mill started up, and some of the most prolific, I would consider them tabloids, sort of written about Crowley, which were just sort of poof stuff made up out of thin air by a number of people. Some, I won't get into that. I was going to start going into the specifics, but I want to make the point that with regards to the rumor mill, when the wickedest man in the world things started, Crowley very much wanted to sue, but didn't have the funds. So he was kind of out of luck. But yeah, that still follows him today. And another point, just sort of off the top of my head, that came to mind was we're spending a lot of time talking about Crowley as sort of like the seed to which all of this started. And he sort of ushered in this magical current, the 93 current. He was the prophet of the new aeon, all of this stuff. And I know prophet's a loaded word, but I'll just tell listeners and viewers to bear with me. But for me, personally, as a Thelemite, he was just a dude. He, to me, is not Jesus. I do not try to emulate him, and I do not try to be him. The only thing I am trying to be and aspiring to is myself. That's really it. I'm trying to be the best, most complete version of myself as I can, which really, I think, reflects a lot of other spiritual practitioners, seekers, whatever they want to call themselves. It's just perhaps this is the language I used and the path in which I've chose to go there. But yeah, I think it is important that Crowley was just a guy, and he is sort of separate from Thelema in a way. He did a lot of cool things. He was a very cool person. He's very interesting. And you know, I must say some of the language he used, specifically in his private diaries, I disagree with, especially from a modern perspective. But I do think that what he contributed and gave to humanity through his work far outweighs the weird stuff he said in his diaries or his negligent relationships or whatever people may have issue with.
Well, then we come to, you know, one of the tenets and one of the things connected to Thelema, of course, is the Book of the Law. And it seems from my point of view, people have misinterpreted even sort of the basic law, do as thou wilt, at least from what I've overheard. Is that your experience?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So the Book of the Law is the central sacred holy text of Thelema. So that was the first holy text to be ushered in the new aeon. And there are subsequent other holy texts, which are very interesting. We're talking about the Book of the Law, which is the first, and it was a channeled text over the course of 3 days into 3 chapters in Cairo, Egypt, that Crowley, when Crowley was on honeymoon with his wife, Rose. It's a really interesting, beautiful text that has some just deep, I don't know, deep insight, deep knowledge. So if someone has a chance to do so, then I definitely recommend reading the Book of the Law, even if you're not a Thelemite. And if you need help understanding that book, I recommend the commentaries on the Book of the Law, if you can get a hold of those. But that being said, let's go back to this main core tenet of Thelema, which is do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. So do what thou wilt means to follow your will. And it means not to just do whatever you want in a hedonistic way, but instead to align your actions and your efforts in life with your true will. And your true will is the central concept of your innermost spark of divinity, your true self. And that's something for you to know and discover. I can't tell you. Crowley couldn't have told you. It's something that you have to find in your own spiritual journey. But once you find that, your goal then is a very restricted life. It's to live in accordance with that. And I like this example. So I'm going to give an example for what it means to be living your true will. So, for example, if I were to feel the calling to be a classical ballerina in my life, I would have had to have started very young. And I use this example actually because my grandmother started me on doing ballet when I was very, very young, because she envisioned me becoming a ballerina. So this is where this example comes from. So I would have had to start very early. I would have had to get on point, and I would have had to have dedicated a large part of my life, my free time, my energy into doing ballet, to aspire to be on that stage. And while I am doing all of that, I can't use my time, for example, to be studying mathematics in college to become a physicist. Now, of course, as we go through our life, there's possibly still time to retool yourself. But at some certain point, the time has already passed that my body is too old to relearn those muscle memories to become a ballerina. If, for example, I decided to go to college and study physics, which is actually what I did. You know, so that's the idea of true will. You can't do everything in your life. It's this process as we go along of making personal choices in alignment with ourselves so that we may live an authentic life to ourselves and our true will and end up where we need to be as a person, as opposed to just going with the flow of society or going with whatever whim we may have on the day. For example, if my aspiration was to become a ballerina, I can't just not practice ballet and get up on stage and expect to do it. You have to, every day, even if you don't want to practice, wake up and practice, stretch, work out, you know? So that's the idea. The idea is constantly making mindful choices in alignment to that. So instead of being an expansive form of hedonism, it's actually quite a narrow, restrictive mindful practice.
That's a really interesting point. And then the second part of that, love is the law, love under will. I've always thought that was an interesting way of saying things. Like, what does that mean, love under will?
Yeah. I'm so happy to talk about that. So I think this is a beautiful point, and I sort of actually use that as a mantra for myself as well. So when we talk about love is the law, we're talking about unification. So that could be romantic love, but that could just simply be making friendships in life, sort of like bouncing around, coming into contact with people, ideas, creative sparks of creativity, whatever we're coming in contact with in our lives. That unification, that momentary unification, is what we're talking about. And we have a natural, a natural inclination or draw or urge to unite with our environment, the people in our lives, philosophies, all kinds of things. But the idea is to keep that unification in check under our will. So the most important thing that we are doing is we are aligning our actions with our will. So for example, if I wanted to use the example of romantic love, but sure, let's do this. It could be anything though. Here, we'll use a work colleague. So if I were to, for example, in a coffee shop, run into someone who is extremely interesting, charismatic, and they're like, hey, we want you to come on our TV show to talk about coffee and market coffee. I'd be like, wow, that's a really attractive proposal because I get to be on TV, I get to interact with other people. That sounds like I would learn something about video production. But I have to sit back and think, wait, hold on. I don't want to do this. I don't want to unite with this opportunity and this moment in time because my true will is elsewhere. I have to keep that under my will.
Makes
my
sense.
true will is to spend my time over here. And the same with romantic love or whatever it could be.
That's great. I love that example too. And it does make you realize that it's more of a discipline than, as you said earlier, just kind of doing whatever the heck comes in your mind, which I think, I don't know why people have that perception, but they do. And then another perception that I think I have noticed with people is because of the sex magic in Crowley's work, that they think all orders are practicing sexual magic all the time, and there's at certain degrees you do more sex, and that's something, I mean, that's what I have heard as a rumor. So that would be an interesting one to talk about too.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. I always forget that people have that perception because nothing I do really has anything to do with sex magic day to day. Although I think sex magic is really cool and I'm very excited about it. For people who are watching on YouTube, you may like zoom into my bookshelf and see there are quite a bit of explorations on that. Yeah, it's a big interest of mine. But Thelema, sex magic has not that big of a part in Thelema. It's one of those practices you can engage with if you want, but it's not necessary. Versus something like yoga or meditation, I would say the most important tool as a Thelemite is to be able to meditate according to your, what you need to meditate. And to be able to perhaps practice that mindfulness in a meaningful way, that's going to get you a lot further than sex magic, which is a more advanced sort of practice anyway. But yeah, let's spend some time on it. So let's first talk about the OTO. So Ordo Templi Orientis is a paramasonic organization, which I already mentioned. And I want to also mention that you do not have to join any organization to be a Thelemite. It's sort of like, if you want this, you can. And same with the AA as a teaching order. Like, you can do all of the work yourself. Crowley said you can, and you can. And there's some fantastic books out there to help you with it. Actually, not to plug this new book again, but In the Way of the Will, David goes into some specific advice for people interested in that. But anyway, so, full disclosure, I am a member of the OTO, and I am a local body officer here at Star of Babylon. because I think it's a very valuable organization to my community. We do a lot of stuff like the Gnostic Mass that people can come to without joining, and there's no pressure to join. But I just want people to be able to experience the magical rituals of Aleister Crowley and keep that tradition alive, because it's been so impactful on me. And I think it'll be impactful for others. So anyway, yes, so the sex magic, or that metaphor happening in some of our rituals like the Gnostic Mass, is not literal sex. For example, in the Gnostic Mass, the priest has a lance and the priestess has a cup. That could be viewed as a symbolism for that sort of sexual unification. But this all, perhaps, you can imagine it taking place on the Kabbalistic tree of life. And I challenge our viewers and listeners, if the cup and the lance are metaphors for sexual unification, what is the sex a metaphor? That's the most important thing of the ritual. But is there actual sex happening? No, absolutely not. But this idea of regeneration, of procreation, is used symbolically in some of the rituals like the Gnostic Mass. And as far as public and private rituals go, I could assure you, nobody is going to be having sex with you. To quote Lon Milo Duquette, if someone does have sex with you, it's because of your own charms. Meaning, none of our rituals involve sex, actual literal sex.
Now, I know that this is a little off topic, but I'm kind of curious. I know you're very active in-person ritual, and I'm wondering, do you find that Thelema is growing during this time? Because I know a lot of churches are losing attendance on many different religions, and except for, unfortunately, the Mormons. So they're evidently growing. I don't know. I know that's not nice to say, but they are growing, the Mormons. Wondering with Thelema, how do you find that, is it especially in-person kind of ceremonies?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's really hard for me to know because I haven't really seen those big numbers, but I would say it's slowly growing. I think there was a real boom of interest during the pandemic and lockdown times because people were at home and we were looking for things to do, and the occult and mysticism and magic and meditation and mindfulness are things you can do at home solo. So I think there was a boom, but I think that, maybe there was a little dip, but it's still on the upward trajectory. And I do see this conversation take place on social media that, in-person ritual, magical orders, all of this stuff is going to go away eventually because we have the internet. And I don't think so at all. The thing about humans is we love experiences. That's why we pay for weird vacation experiences. That's why we go to the bar that's serving bacon on ice cream in a daiquiri. We're like, oh heck yeah, sign me up for the weird thing, because we enjoy experiences. And it comes to mind when I was in Tokyo pre-pandemic, I went to a butler cafe, which was a wild experience. It was really cool. I'm getting off topic, but people will always crave those experiences, and that includes spiritual experiences. Now, whether or not that person, if they want to come to an in-person ritual or do an initiation, stays with it, that's fine. But I think there's always that curiosity and that desire to connect with other humans, to have an experience. And so I think we're slowly we're slowly growing, inching our way up as people leave perhaps more traditional church structures and seek community and experiences elsewhere. And I think there always will be, just a very basic human need for community and connection.
Yeah, I agree with you. The pendulum will swing back. And I've had a hard time when I was more involved with this one Buddhist center. I'd gotten away from Buddhism, and then I came back, and I'd always, of course, we didn't have the internet when I was doing it, and I always had in-person meditations and things. And I don't know, even with one person, it makes such a huge difference when you do these practices. I'm not saying that they don't have any use, but I found it just did not remotely touch the level that you can go with people in person. Even like I said, even one other person, you don't even need a lot of people. So of course, a lot of people can make it really cool. So, but it seems like now, since we were talking a little bit about social media, do you think social media right now is helping to perpetuate more positive or let's say truthful information about Thelema? Do you feel like it's twisting it, maybe a bit of both? What is your experience with social media and Thelema and the Thelemites?
Yeah, well, I think it's overall a horribly negative thing. I think we're sort of living in a weird digital dark age of being ruled by the algorithm and AI and sort of this. So when we're on social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, it's important to realize the information you're being shown is the information that gets the most engagement. And the truth of the matter is, the things that get the most engagement aren't the most true things. They are the things that are most inflammatory, the most rage-inducing, and the most clickbaity. So whoever can sell you the most inflammatory thing will win the competition of the algorithm, right?
Yeah.
And we come back to these ideas when it comes to a social media content creator. And when I use that term, I don't just mean someone who's on social media posting. I mean someone who is paid by advertisers to create content, to move products, to target specific demographics. So it's important to remember that some of the big names and things we experience on the internet are backed by money. And they're backed by a motivation for their ego as well. Because a lot of people just want a lot of engagement because it feels good and it feels validating. And the way they do that is by what I like to call rage farming, or where they intentionally post something wrong or mean or spiteful. In that way, they can get the comments that engage in that sort of spiral of anger and, rage, and they get more engagement. And more engagement means sometimes more money, more ego, any of these things. So I think that in all aspects of our lives, including the spiritual, social media distorts it profoundly. And the question then would be, what is a response to that? I don't know. I sort of come back to Hegel's idea of what is evil. And Hegel had this idea that true evil is when you believe you are all good and the other person is all bad. When we think about atrocities committed in the world and the history of that, the person doing them doesn't think they're evil. They don't think that they're a cartoonish Disney villain, wringing out their hands, being, hee, I'm going to do something evil. No, they're like, I'm doing good. I am the good person doing good. And that's when the evil act occurs. And the response to this, which I think is the good response to viewing social media as well, is that there's good and bad in all people and all things. And in social media, there was good and bad in truth and falsehoods and all things. So just because someone is getting a lot of engagement or something seems real doesn't mean it is.
Yeah, that's really interesting thoughts that you just shared. I love that term, rage farming. That's really brilliant. Like, yes, that's exactly what I would call it, rage farming. And then I was thinking as you were talking that about the will and about how do we get in touch with our will, and how in astrology, I've been studying the planet Mars more because Mars is a little overly demonized. And it's really only sometimes seen as an angry god, and it's associated with our will. And then I was thinking like, rage, and then the fact that all these people are really engaging in this rage is maybe it's people just don't have a connection to their true will. And they don't know how to use their Mars energy. They don't know how to discipline, because what you can do is say, I'm not just going to listen to this. And of course, all of that goes away when people stop engaging. So it's our responsibility as consumers not to fall for the trap and say, okay, you're setting a pretty good trap, but I don't have to. So it made me think about maybe this idea of will, and Thelema is useful for everybody.
Yeah, wow, that's a great point. And I actually read another book that was pretty good called Digital Minimalism. And so I'll recommend that one also to people who are interested in getting a little like, how do I get control of my social media and internet addiction or phone addiction? Digital Minimalism was a great read for me. It really helped me further analyze how I was interacting with social media, the internet in general, and I think it is a worthwhile pursuit to question what you're doing online and how you're spending your time. We only have so long in this lifetime on this earth, it's best to use that mindfully and with intention, if possible.
And some of it seems like there are magical principles that some of these people use, and that's another reason to listen to anything about magic, and so that you know what's going on, how people are manipulating you, so you're not as vulnerable to it. So one other thing I was kind of curious about with Thelema is if someone decided they wanted to embrace it more, is there a ritual people can do or that they do that is often like, witchcraft has rituals. Sometimes they're very, you make it up, and sometimes it's something formal. A lot of, I think, spiritual paths have something to show that, hey, I'm committing myself to this path, and this is my way of initiating. I've never heard if they do have a ritual like that in Thelema.
Yeah. Well, we have a number of different organizations offer initiations. So obviously the OTO offers initiations that are private, and you can go up those degrees for people who want that initiatory experience. And so people who might be like, oh, what do you mean by that? What is that like? It's basically experiencing a dramatic play through the ritual that allows you to learn something from the experience, learn something about yourself, about the cosmos. There's something really special about ritual and experiences that imprints it on your soul, and the learning, like we just talked about, in person with other people in this specific ritual, you just can't replace it with a book. So that happens, but there's also initiations in the AA. There's initiations of other Thelemic orders like Temple of the Silver Star, which is a Golden Dawn style Thelemic group. So for people who are familiar with the Golden Dawn style initiations, that's an option. And so yeah, you could actually go through an actual initiation, which has many trappings, which I won't get into. But you could also do a lot of stuff on your own. So two things I'm going to mention for people who are interested in sort of getting a feel for the 93 current and Thelemic magic. The first one is Liber Resh Vel Helios. It's a solar adoration performed every day, 4 times a day, and it basically aligns yourself with those solar energies and allows you to draw energy from it. Well, at least for advanced practitioners can do that. But it's also just a way to inject mindfulness throughout your day. You stop and you pause, you do this small ritual, and then you keep going. And like I said, you do it at dawn, middle of the day, sunset, and then midnight. Obviously we're sleeping, so a lot of people just do it when they wake up, middle of the day, sunset, and before they go to bed. So that's a great ritual for people who are interested. Another one I do every day is saying will before I eat my main meals of the day, which is people compare it to praying before your meal, but you're really not. You're just setting your intention up. And that's a really beautiful way to, again, mindfully eat. You remind yourself of why you're eating food, why you get up in the morning, why you're doing this. And that's a beautiful one to do as well.
What do you mean exactly by saying will? What would that sound like?
Sure. I could do the ritual for you if you would like.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
short.
Sure.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Okay, so I'm going to do this with a cup and a pen. So normally I'd be doing this ritual with a knife in my hand, I'd be hitting the table, but that is not available to me because I'm surrounded by sound insulating foam. So this is for our listeners as well. Pretend like I'm banging the table. And this is the solo version of will. There is a version you could do with other people. So do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. It is my will to eat and drink, that I may fortify my body thereby, that I may accomplish the great work. Love is the law, love under will. Fall 2.
So what was that at the end?
Love is the law, love under will, and then fall 2.
That's really concise and neat. I like that. I can see how that can help you keep yourself focused.
Absolutely. If people want a longer explanation of Liber Resh Vel Helios or saying Will, I have videos and demonstrations all on my YouTube channel.
Yes, they're very good. I've watched some of your
Thank you.
videos. You do a great job. Now, one of the things
so much.
that I think is maybe perhaps a perception, and I don't know if it's true or not, is that there are more men than women that belong to the organizations. Not that necessarily that they're a Thelemite, because there could be, who knows, because not everyone's going to tell you. So what is since you're active, at least in your community, what do you perceive about that?
Yeah, not anymore. So the OTO consists of like different bodies spread across the US. And what what used to be the case with more men joining is not the case at all. In fact, there are instances, and I'll provide examples later, where there's more women than men. But there are specific cases that I became aware of where, for example, a man joins, specifically like, someone who's in the gay or queer community, who brings in other gentlemen from that same community. So people tend to bring their friends, right? And so, you're hanging out with your friends. Oh, let's all go to a Gnostic mass, and all of your friends happen to be dudes. You met at the gay bar or whatever. So that happens where like there's local community instances where there's a ton of guys. But I can't think of any in terms of the US where it's just dudes. In fact, we do see kind of a shift in the other direction where it's a lot of women and femme practitioners, a lot of, always a lot of queer people, of course, people who are genderqueer otherwise. But there was an instance just not too long ago that on the East Coast, from New York down to Florida, it was nothing but women as body masters of the local OTO body. So that's pretty cool. I'm a local body officer as well. But yeah, I'm not a body master, but our body master locally is a femme identifying person. So grateful for that diversity in our community.
So it sounds like the women are also moving more into leadership positions in the organization itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was my experience with other Thelemic organizations as well, is there are a shift to be more inclusive, to be more diverse. The OTO, for example, has a diversity task force, which is addressing ways to use language more inclusively and other issues. And on that subject, for people who may be like, oh, I thought Thelema was this weird, conservative, regressive thing, I just want to dispel that myth and read you something directly from Aleister Crowley. So this is Aleister Crowley's, one of his comments on the Book of the Law. And again, the Book of the Law is our central sacred holy text. And this is what Crowley has to say about it. He says, "We do not fool and flatter women. We do not despise and abuse them. To us, a woman is herself, absolute, original, independent, free, self-justified, exactly as a man is." So.
Wow, I've never read that. That's amazing. That was written a long time ago.
Oh yeah, extremely progressive, and from the start of all the orders Crowley created, like the AA, women were there from the very inception of the Book of the Law to the orders he was doing, and without women, Thelema wouldn't exist. So.
Well, that's the other thing I noticed, that more information is being published, like in Colin Campbell's book about Rose Kelly, and the way the women played important roles in Aleister Crowley's, and they're given a lot more credit. I thought that was interesting too. When I did just a very brief research, and who wouldn't be curious about the women in his life? And so it seems like even Lady Frida Harris, I finally found someone that's done some kind of a research paper on her. There's just not a lot on her, and what a fascinating lady she was, and what a great artist. So I think that seems to be happening a little bit more too. So that's a positive thing. But that's amazing. I've never heard that Crowley had said that. That is a very progressive thing for him to have said when he wrote it. Now, one of the kind of a small question I have is, why do the people that in Thelema, they greet each other with 93? What is the 93 current? I've never really looked into that, or I don't understand it, but it's just very common.
Yeah, so there's this idea in magic in general that if you when you're talking about the Greek alphabet, it's called isopsophy. When you're talking about Hebrew, it's called gematria. And it's this idea of taking the alphabetical letters and equating them to numbers, and then from those numbers, drawing further meaning and extrapolating out that meaning. So that's a really big rabbit hole to go down into. But if you take 93, for example, which is sort of like a Thelemic greeting that people say to each other. 93 stands for basically, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. So that's so Thelema in Greek, when you extrapolate that out, Thelema meaning will, or Thelema, meaning will, that equals 93. Same with agape, meaning love, 93.
I didn't know that. That's really cool.
So yeah, the 93s are just a shorthand of that. So if we were to do like the full formal greeting, one Thelemite would say, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And the other person would respond, love is the law, love under will. But yeah, 93 is just a shorthand version of that.
Oh, cool. So going back to sort of the early part of the show when you were talking about how certain witchcraft and pagan communities are blocking, have these really misperceptions about you guys being, Black magicians. How can people like myself and other people who are in this community be allies to you? Like I said, I really didn't know that was going on. I can understand if it was like a Christian church or something you wanted to rent, because, that still goes on for everyone that isn't of that faith even. So that I didn't know that was going on, and that really makes me sad.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. I love a good call to action. So I would encourage people to, I guess, be open-minded and mindful of the fact that Thelemites especially are an extremely marginalized religious group of people. Occultists are marginalized, and then within the occult community is ceremonial magicians, and within another niche is Thelemites. So, just be mindful of that. And if you do happen to see us purposely being excluded, someone saying bigoted hate speech, either in your in-person community or online, and in my experience, it's extremely flagrant. It's like, hey, I think we should ban Thelemites and anything by Aleister Crowley from our space or this conversation, or I want to purposely exclude this person because of their beliefs. And this comes back to what is bigotry, but judging someone based on these attributions. And so if you do see someone purposely excluding, saying disrespectful, cruel remarks, say, hey, don't do that. Or, hey, that's not true. Or, hey, Thelemites are good people. I have a Thelemite friend, or, something like that. I think we really, because there's so few of us that a lot of people never meet a Thelemite. And it's very easy to demonize and discriminate against people you don't know. So I guess I would just encourage people to be kind, make space for us, and you may experience the gift of diversity and to learn different perspectives, to learn from different types of people from you, and maybe that could be useful for you in understanding yourself, the broader world. I mean, even if it's just understanding what you're not, that's helpful information. But for the most part, I would say Thelemites are some of the nicest, kindest people I've ever had the pleasure of interacting with. I'm always excited to learn about other types of beliefs or rituals. I purposely sign myself up for things outside of my normal experiences, like ADF druid rituals or witchcraft, It's just so valuable to get different experiences and to learn from different people. So Thelemites are full of life and are different human beings just like everyone else.
I guess one of the things we could encourage everyone to do is in your own area, if there's a Gnostic Mass, they could attend one and sort of see what it's really about. And I mean, that's because once you start going to, like you said, if you sort of start opening your mind to other traditions and you go to some event that they do, that definitely gives you at least a feeling if there's anything legitimate to the rumors. I have heard people say that the Thoth deck is dark. And I thought, well, the colors are kind of dark in some of the cards. I mean, that always sort of perplexed me. I was like, it's a deck of cards with beautiful illustrations. And yes, they have meaning, but it's not going to jump up and attack you. As far as I know, mine hasn't for years. So there are certainly portals into worlds, but it's funny how people... I think no matter what, even though Thelema is bigger than Aleister Crowley, he is a huge imprint on it, no matter what you say, because of his character. And maybe because wasn't his motto like he'll live on or something forever, and it was like this is how he does it, I think. So.
Well, and that's the wild thing is, absolutely, he left a huge imprint, and is in so much of Thelema. But you know what else he is also in? Wicca, modern paganism, just about any kind of magic you would touch today. In the Western esotericism realm, Crowley's in there, and it's sort of ironic to see people be like, oh yeah, I hate Thelemites, and then turn around and make use of his magic.
That's an excellent point. And that was one of his intentions, as you said earlier, is to help, mankind have it all accessible to everybody. And I think he accomplished that, no doubt, that and some other people, obviously he wasn't the only one that did that, but his contribution, like you said, well, that's always it's too bad you can't just say that to those people. Hey, you use his magic, you just don't know it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, but yeah, I think that's wonderful for you to mention the Gnostic Mass. So that is a public, one of the primary public rituals of the OTO. You can just come to it. You don't have to join. I would just reach out ahead of time to your local OTO body, wherever that is, to make sure if they have any requirements, like a dress code or anything, you meet that. If you have to pay a fee, any of that kind of stuff, parking.
Yes.
And then just show up and have an amazing experience. And, we love experiences, like I said, whether you're in Tokyo paying a butler to serve you, tea cakes, or you go into a Crowley ritual. I mean, it's all part of the human experience.
Yeah. Is that done regularly? Like, is it done on a monthly basis? Does it depend on the order, the particular chapter?
Yeah, it depends on the local OTO body. Here locally at Star Babylon, we try to have them once a month. Some bodies have them more, some have them less. It just depends.
So, as we get closer to the end of the show, is there anything more that you wanted people to know about misperceptions, or even more truth that you really want to support around being part of this and how it's affected your life? What else would you like to add?
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I'll definitely end it on a personal note that Thelema has been a incredibly powerful tool of transformation for me personally to live a more mindful existence, more true to myself. I talk about this a lot, but I do have a background of being a scientist and then working in corporate law, and just sort of that corporate hellhole that I came from that completely wore me down. And I was at a place in my life that I was willing to try anything and everything, and my mind went back to reading Aleister Crowley and this idea of true will. And I said, well, that's kind of weird. And the guy seems kind of weird. He seems interesting but weird, but what if I just gave it a shot? And I did, and I didn't know this, but I embarked in a life-changing, and I mean that sincerely, a life-changing body of work and experiences on the journey to myself. And that was just simply from me doing the work on my own. I have since time joined Thelemic orders, and those are really cool, but the work at the end of the day was my own, and I think it's open to everyone. You don't have to be someone special or have special psychic gifts or be any of these other things. You can just be a person who is interested in this idea of true will and doing your true will, and or just doing Thelemic magic and seeing how that feels, and perhaps that will bring in some beautiful gifts in your life. And again, you don't have to fully subscribe to the Book of the Law and accept it as a holy book to get something out of it. You're free to draw from that what you wish, and make your life more meaningful and beautiful. That's at the end of the day what I hope people take away from my work, is a more spiritually aligned and fulfilled life.
Do you think that you knew your true will before you came across, or you dedicated yourself to more Thelema, or do you think you discovered it more once you started doing some of the rituals and magic?
I think when I was younger, I think I had a sense. It's funny, when we're pure and children, playing around, what we're drawn to. I think I was more in line with my true will than when I got so profoundly lost in the corporate world and the world of expectations from society and these sort of, capitalist ideas of success and goals, and I was really far lost. I think at that point in my adult life, the corporate world life, I had no idea. I was so lost. And nothing, and you're like, okay, what do I do? And like everyone has a solution, everyone has a self-help book, and I like ran through those and nothing was working. And I was like, okay, what is the weird guy in that like pointy robe talking about Crowley? I was like, people, always warned me. They're like, oh, Thelema is so dark, it's so intense, and I was like, I need intense. I want someone to just rip my soul. I want to rip my own soul out and look at it and know, even if it destroys me. And I think that was the right attitude. And that's a good point. I think if you already feel like you know your will and you don't want to disrupt your life, then this perhaps is not a good choice for you. If you're already content and happy in things, because when you start discovering yourself in really deep, profound ways, and then begin to journey to do that will, because once you have that divine knowledge, you kind of have to do something about it, right? You can't just go back to your old life. That knowledge opens doors for you, and this system of mysticism will open doors in many ways. And once those doors are open, you have to go through them. So it really helped me know my will better and give me the tools to do my will, and completely disrupted my life in scary but ways that were ultimately very good.
Well, that is an interesting point of whether or not you want to tear up your life, in the sense that that makes some sense, though I guess sometimes people are also kind of comfortable but not really happy. They just don't know they're not really happy. So there's that, which one is it? So,
yeah.
Am I just being complacent and going along with things? Or it sounds like you really were seeking. I think that's the main thing. You really wanted something real and genuine.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's an accurate assessment of that. And I think there are a lot of people that are really seeking that as well. And I think that the tools that Thelema provides, they're powerful tools in your arsenal if you're willing to take them.
It does seem like that. I still am going through some of some of the text, some of the things I've read. Not just I also like Lon Milo DuQuette's books, and
I love his
he's
stuff.
been on our show, and we love him. He's just awesome, and he's really integrated things a lot, I think, and brought it into the modern world. And so I've read, I don't know, at least 3 or 4 of his books at least, and all in his humor. You're right, he's just a great humorist. So. There's a lot to offer that's in this Thelema, I think, and I think there's maybe you get discriminated against, but at least more books are coming out from different authors. So publishing world seems to be liking you.
Yeah, and it's a and that's a good point. It's a living tradition. It may have started with Crowley, but it did not end with him. And there's some fantastic people keeping it alive, like David Shoemaker, Lon Milo DuQuette, Richard Kaczynski, Colin. Rodney Orpheus. I mean, there's just so many people I could list who are just such bright rays of inspiration alive today. And we're very fortunate to have those people.
And you as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to help out when I can. And what a joy and pleasure it is to join you all and talk about something I love so much.
Well, thank you again for coming back on the show. It's been really interesting, and I hope you come back another time. And
oh, yeah.
Thank you all for listening in. Join us next time as we continue to explore the esoteric and the obscure together. Have a magical week.